The Matric pass rate for 2019 stands at 81.3%, and that's an improvement of 3.1% from the previous year's 78.2%. Over 790,000 full-time and part-time candidates sat for the 2019 Matric exam nationwide. So to delve into this a little further, we're joined by Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga to speak about this. Minister, good morning and welcome to you.
Good morning, Sakina, and thank you very much for having me.
So we finally hit that 80% mark. Your sentiments?
No, I'm very encouraged. It just really gives lots of hope that we can continue to address the many challenges that still affect the sector.
And you know, those challenges, those are the things that we need to speak to, because in as much as we are seeing improvement, the challenges that remain are stark as well. So let's just talk to those. For you as the Minister of Basic Education, which would you say stands out?
Infrastructure. We have a huge infrastructure backlog and we just seem not to be coping. It's the resources, it's the needs and the challenges are just massive. Our foundations are not strong enough. We have to sort out, as a country, we don't have a comprehensive early childhood development program which caters for all children. So you have a few that have access, you have a few that will only start seeing early childhood programs at grade R. We have to start from zero. So that's one of the massive things that we have to do. The architecture of the system, I think we have to address the architecture of the system. We have very limited pathways which will be able to cater for all talents and interests. We still have one pathway in the main, the academic pathway. Our technical and vocational have not matured adequately to get there. So, and those are some of the problems. Your reading skills, as I say, from the bottom, your foundation phase, your intermediate phase, even your senior phase are still fragile. So there's lots that we have to do to continue to strengthen the system.
And let's pick up at early childhood development, because you rightly say that there's a lot of work that needs to be done there, because very often, like we do now, we focus on the Matric results, whereas those foundations are laid way before.
Way before.
And if we don't get the foundations right, we can't expect to see those wonderful results at Matric level.
And we'll struggle. We'll continue to see high repetition rates, which is a problem in the system. We have one of the highest repetition rates. After grade 9, we also experience high dropout rates, and simply because the foundations are weak, and sometimes learners find it very difficult to continue to climb up. So we have to sort out the foundations to deal with our high repetition rates, our high dropout rates, and sometimes even not, I mean, we only at 36 for bachelors. Our target is to at least have 50% bachelors, even if they don't all go to universities. But we have to improve the quality of our passes. We have to make sure that we continue to have more learners getting into maths, so that we have higher intakes in maths. So there's still a number of problems that we need to improve or to work on within the system.
But that also has been a perpetual problem. And where does the problem lie, as per your assessment as the department?
Weak foundations. By the time children reach grade 10, when they're supposed to go into 11, 12, the foundations that they come with, or the deficits that they come with, just strangle them, and they find it difficult to cope with maths at an FET level, or even have the confidence to go through after grade 9 to go and take up maths. So we have to sort out the foundations if we have to sort out the problems at a high level.
But are we winning? Are we making any inroads, any strides in that regard with regard to the teaching of mathematics and science as well?
As I say, it's the foundation. It will be difficult to blame teachers who are at the high level, because it's at the end of the system when you are in 10, 11, and 12. If your foundations are weak and children don't have the confidence to take maths and science, your high school teachers have very little to work on. What we have to sort out, which continues to be a problem, is your weak foundations in your foundation phase and your intermediate phase, because your intermediate phase is a hump that by the time they go to senior phase, lots of damage has happened. So we have refocused our attention. That's why we're even focusing on improving our assessment regime, that we do want to work on assessing nationally your grade 3s, your grade 6, your grade 9s, so that the system understands from the word go what are the expectations phase by phase, by really providing them with a national framework of, a national assessment framework, so that we assess nationally. A child who's in grade 3 in Bulobedi must be at the same level with the child in grade 3 in Soweto, and our tools should be able to indicate that indeed we're working together. Our learners in this country find a national assessment or confront a national assessment only when they're in grade 12, and it is a problem.
So what about all the other diagnostic reports that the department has at its disposal? You know, when we talk about children at the foundation phase level already struggling with, you know, basic literacy, with basic numeracy, what are we doing already at that foundation stage? What sort of interventions have you come up with?
Now, the points I'm making are informed by those diagnostic tests. I mean, as a human being, as a person, I will know all the problems. It's the academics that are helping us, pointing out through interacting with us. It's our partners in the NGO sectors to say, as we interact with your learners, this is what we're experiencing. But more important, it's our own diagnostic tests in the system, which point to the directions that I'm speaking of.
And then just coming back to the Matric results, and of course 80%, there's always talk about the throughput and the learners who fall by the wayside. It's an annual conversation. This year, are you able to give us some of the statistics in that regard?
No, and it's just that every researcher works on their own information. According to the information and the statistics that we have, as a basic education system, up to grade 9, we have more than 90% registration. We begin to experience high dropout rates at grade 10 and 11 and high repetition rates at the rate of 30%, which gives us around 30 to 40% dropout rate. So according to our statistics, the retentions remain at 60% in a very at a very conservative level at grade level. So all the 37% that is floated by all the other researchers are not necessarily, I mean, Gauteng claims that they have 70% retention rate. Eastern Cape claims, Western Cape claim also a 70% retention rate. So it's different provinces, like in rural provinces, where there's huge out-migration, where they're losing lots of children. So our retention rates are not as low as 37%. I can confidently say at matric level, our retention rates are at 60%, bearing in mind that some of the learners divert and go to FET colleges. So not all children will go to matric or take the academic stream. Some kids go to as I say, to your TVET colleges. Some go to do other careers. They're going to careers which don't necessarily require an academic performance. But if we use the group that goes and complete the academic stream, it's about 60%.
So are you concerned, though, about knowing factually what happens to that 40%? Because I think as a country, a nation that is struggling with high levels of unemployment, we need to track those learners to find out what ultimately happens to them.
No, that's what informs our Second Chance program. We have a comprehensive program where we give them support, working with higher education and CETAs to reskill them. But the 3-stream curriculum is informed by that, to that it's an international trend that not all learners anywhere in the world, after passing grade 9, would go for the academic stream. Other learners, out of interest, talents, and abilities, will want to go to the technical and to the vocational. And that's why we're working very hard to make sure that indeed we can open pipelines around your vocational, your technical, so that we can stream learners according to their talents, their gifts, and their interests. And that we are confident will cater for some of the reasons why our children leave school before they complete their matric.
And on that point, that grade 9 school leaving certificate, and as you say, some may choose to go into technical fields, etc. But is that process in any way regulated, or is it just a matter of if a learner chooses to leave the formal schooling system at grade 9, that's the end of your involvement with them?
No, before you were born, I did matric. I did what we call JC, and it made me leave school. We had JC certificate. If you wanted to go and do matric, you had matric. And now we're saying, if you have Standard 9 certificate. If you want to go and do Matric, you're free to go and do Matric. They can all still choose to go and do Matric. If you want to go into the vocational stream, you're also able to go to the vocational stream. If you want to go to the technical stream, you're also free to go to the technical stream. The whole idea, and we have to separate, the whole idea of your assessment of grade 3, 6, and 9 is to set up your national standards about what the expectations are. But it's also to recognize the end of the phase of basic education and the beginning of further education and training.
So just going back to the Matric results now, one of the other challenges you mentioned earlier was that of infrastructure. Province like Limpopo, who were at the bottom in the 2019 Matric results, there were issues that were cited, such as, sanitation issues. They also cited textbooks in 2019, and that's a bit of a bitter pill to swallow if any school mentions that, because one would imagine that we would have gone past that by now. And also issues of unrest in communities, protests whereby children stay away. How's the department dealing with all of that?
No, those continue to be problems. Infrastructure, it's not a Limpopo problem only. Gauteng has major infrastructure problems. Classes are crowded because of in-migration. Western Cape will also complain. They have a different kind of problems around infrastructure. Their infrastructure breaks on a daily basis because schools are overcrowded. KZN, rural and poor, has major infrastructure problems. I'm going there tomorrow. The storms in December wiped off 81 schools. So it's a major problem nationally. So no province can claim to say we're at the bottom because of infrastructure. I think it's disingenuous because all provinces are struggling. Eastern Cape had a 5.9% improvement this year, despite the fact that they also have infrastructure problems. In terms of textbooks, it's a provincial competency, and I still want to remind people that it's a provincial competence. But the biggest responsibility is in schools. A textbook is supposed to last for 3 years in the school. But if schools don't retrieve textbooks from learners, then the state can afford to buy textbooks every day. It's a very expensive exercise. It's about 3 billion a year. So you can't buy textbooks every year. We keep on hammering to schools that they have to have good retrieval systems, first to protect the learners who are coming from the other grades, but also to protect the state, because it's unaffordable to think the state will buy textbooks every day. So it's an unacceptable. We're insisting on schools to improve their retrieval rates. A textbook is supposed to last between 3 and 5 years, and that's how we budget for textbooks in schools. So you're quite correct, not only in Limpopo, in Mpumalanga and other provinces. When I visit there, I still get lots of complaints that they don't have enough textbooks. And on an ongoing basis, we try to help them, but it's provinces that have really to make sure that schools retrieve textbooks and look after textbooks.
And with regard to the budget that is available, because we're talking about this infrastructure deficit, but is it a backlog? How much of that is a backlog as opposed to where infrastructure gets vandalized or where things break because of the factors that you mentioned, Minister?
No, it's both. It's a backlog, for instance. We still are sitting with much structures 25 years down the line, because in the past 25 years, with improved access, almost every child turned up for school, so we had to build new schools. That's a big problem. We have to maintain old schools. I mean, if you go to Soweto, most schools, the school I went to in grade 1 still looks the same. We've not been able to upgrade infrastructure that we inherited from apartheid. Some of it, as I say, were schools built by committees. We've not been able to replace them. So it's both maintenance, it's new infrastructure, but it's also being able to remediate what was inherited. The other big problem, which again, because of democracy, people have freedom of movement. They move everywhere. People migrate into areas where there are economic opportunities. They go to the Western Cape, they go into Durban area, they come to Gauteng, they'll be going to Pietersburg. So there's also lots of movements which creates lots of wastages in the system, that in your old townships you find that we have schools that we're not able to use because younger parents and younger people have moved into new areas where we have to build new schools. So it's a mixture of problems. As I say, it's what we've inherited, it's what we had to deal with in terms of open access, but also what we inherited and maintaining what we have.
According to the norms and standards, if we're still talking about mud schools in 2020, then there's a problem. And those communities are being failed, Minister. We shouldn't be talking about mud schools in 2020.
I'm sure I wish for that more than anybody else. If wishes were horses, we will all be riding. Mud schools are built with money. So it depends on the budget. And I sit on the mid-com board in government. I know what are the limitations of the national PES. So I assume, or I really have to contend, that which government gives us legal cities, that's what government can afford. And that's what builds schools. What builds schools is not norms and standards, it's not wishes, it's what is there in the PES. And that's what has been the biggest constraint. For instance, when we made our last calculation of what it will take to wipe off, it was 98 billion. We don't have that money. A year, the state is able only to give us about 10 billion annually out of the 98 billion we want. And what will build schools, it's not norms and standards, it's that 98 billion that we need.
And then I can imagine for a parent whose child attends school in a mud structure, they're sitting there listening to you and thinking, so there's no help coming.
No, there is. There is. But what we're saying, as much as we feel constrained, as much as we wish to be able to address the needs of every child, we're saying under even difficult conditions, we raise kids in shacks and they grow up to be good people and really give the best that we can. So we're saying under the very difficult conditions we operate in, we're trying to do the best that we can, and that's the best we can. They raise kids in mud houses and produce them as very good people. So
but that cannot be our benchmark, Minister.
No, it's not a benchmark.
We have
it's the
to
reality
do better for our children.
No, it's the reality of our lives. That's what I'm saying. We're in a real world. If I was in an abstract and wishful world, I would really have a magic wand. We'll have schools. And as I say, it pains us more than anybody to see our young professionals, our young teachers working in those environments they find themselves in. It pains us. It pains us to visit schools and find that you can't even motivate learners because you accept that or you acknowledge that the environment is not suitable. But we are saying with them, let's work together whilst government is continuing to improve infrastructure and improve conditions, but let's do the best under all the difficult circumstances. And that's why I'm saying we work under very difficult circumstances. Sometimes kids walk longer distances. It's especially for teachers. Sometimes I feel very embarrassed to go to these schools and find the conditions that we're asking young, qualified, highly professional young people to go and work those conditions. But that's the reality of our lives, that we have to do the best under those circumstances. We can't close schools and say, come in 10 years' time when government has been able to get the fund. We can't do it, because that's the other option. It's either we say, stay home, keep your kids at home, we don't have the money to build schools, or we say, let's work together under these very difficult conditions to give the best that we can. And that's the route we have opted for.
And of course, schools will be opening shortly, and I'm sure we'll come back to these discussions once we hone in on, the various schools and the challenges that are faced at the beginning of the academic year. But back to the Matric results and looking at how the provinces fared once again. And at the top, you've got Northwest coming into the top three there. Again, what sort of interventions have they made that have allowed them to progress in that regard?
Northwest has been hovering for a long time around that area. So they will fade with 2%. So they really have been in the top league. So I'm not surprised that they went in, because they belong there. What they did most when we analyzed the results, they gave lots of support to their progress learners. They have a 77% pass rate for learners who are progressed, as compared to Western Cape that only got 37% for progress learners. So it's also the support that provinces give to struggling learners. And I think that's what has helped Northwest a lot. In the Free State, what keeps them there, they're very strong districts. They have worked over a long period of time with your NGOs, your Ramaphosa Foundation, your Kagiso Trust, and they've built a solid foundation. So it's very difficult it's very difficult to shake off Free State from that. Gauteng has been a good performer for all the years, but what they've done quite well in the past years was to focus on township schools, which were not performing quite well. So most provinces, if you can see, the growth has come from your rural schools, your township schools, your schools in farming areas. So the system has been, it's being ramped from the bottom, which has really helped to push up, because that's been also our big concern, that there exists a gap between your affluent schools and schools in the township. And the focus has been on those schools that are underperforming, and hence the improvement, because your highly performing schools are already in the 100%. They can't perform beyond their best performance. So the best performance will only come from your township, your rural and your farm schools.
And of course, always the concern, the 0% schools, those who achieve 0% pass rate.
Yeah. And in the main, those are what we call your small and viable schools in the two rural. And that's why Eastern Cape has been focusing on closing unviable schools. Limpopo, I mean, last time when there was a school which got a 0, I visited a school in Wombat. It's a farm school which had 75 kids, but it's a very small community. And you can't run a school with 75 kids from grade R to 12. It's just completely unviable. So those are small and viable schools that we're targeting to say they have to move into, we have to bus them, or they have to move into boarding schools. Mpumalanga did a very great job. They've consolidated. For instance, they closed 19 farm schools and built 1 big schools. And that's the direction we're moving to, really close the small and viable schools.
And finally, motivation for the class of 2020.
My motivation comes from our top learners, because I always interview them to say, how did you go? All of them say hard work. All of them, all 30 said it's hard work, it's dedication, it's focus, it's humility, it's respect, and just dealing with integrity. And I take it from them because they've proven what works. And they said, all of them, they said it's hard work. So I'm saying, and none of them said, I'm a gifted child, I'm intelligent. And no, they all said, we really worked hard. So for the class of 2020, let's listen to, and that's why we celebrate the top learners to say, how did they make it? They said hard work.
Well, that was the Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga, talking to us about the just released 2019 Matric results and other issues relating to education as well. And no doubt we'll be speaking to the Minister, MECs and others involved in education as learners head back to school to address more of the issues. For now, let's take a break.